On today's episode, I'll be talking about the 2001 cult classic Donnie Darko.
You're looking for a man with no plans or programs, and he always needs a chance to hold hands for romance. Or you're looking for the Luke with an old man or cold hands. It's a creature of the night who heads for his spotlight. I'm here to welcome you to blinded and random reviews. No, nothing when I choose. It's blinded and random reviews.
All right, everyone, welcome to Brandon at Random Reviews, covering one unsystematically chosen topic at a time. If you like listening to a guy talk about arbitrarily chosen subjects in weekly episodes, then look no further. To keep up with the newest content, you can find Brandon at Random Reviews on most major video and audio platforms, as well as all popular social media sites. If you enjoy this, please like and subscribe. I use listener statistics as an alternative currency for purchasing rabbit costumes for Halloween parties. Like I said, today's movie is Donnie Darko, released on January 19th, 2001, with a runtime of 113 minutes. This movie is rated R by the Motion Picture Association of America. Budget, $6 million. Written and directed by Richard Kelly, who also did The Box with Cameron Diaz. I think it's the one where if you push the button on the box, someone in the world dies, but like you get richer or something. And also Southland Tales. I don't know which one it's supposed to be. For the composer, we have Michael Andrews. For the cast, we have Jake Gyllenhaal, who plays the titular character Donnie Darko. He was also in Source Code, which is a solid, underrated movie. Pretty intense, really cool concept for a story. He was in Zodiac, which is one of my all-time favorites. I covered it on one of my shorter form episodes. It's just a great David Fincher movie. It's about the Zodiac killings from the 60s and 70s. It's just very intense. The tension is so well built throughout the movie. I just fucking love it. And he was also in the movie Nightcrawler, which is about a guy who is a photographer, if I recall correctly. He is basically trying to capture crimes before they happen or before the police even know about them. But I may be way off. It's been a while since I watched that one, but it was solid. I liked it. Jenna Malone plays Gretchen Ross, and she was in the movie Contact. And the only reason I really remember her, and especially remember her part in Contact, is because there is this incredibly cool special effects shot where Jenna Malone's character runs up the stairs and into a bathroom and like looks into a mirror in the bathroom and sees herself, and then somehow through camera trickery they make it look like you've seen the whole thing through the mirror, and it doesn't make logical sense. And I've seen how they recreate or how they created the actual shot, and it's fucking amazing, honestly. Mary McDonnell plays Rose Darko, and she was in Dances with Wolves with Kevin Costner. I wasn't like a huge fan of that movie, but it was pretty decent. She played, I think, the first lady in Independence Day, so it would have been Bill Pullman's wife. And solid movie. I rewatched that recently, and it was pretty fucking good. And she was also in Blue Chips. I think she was Nick Nolte's wife in that. Another pretty solid movie. Probably not like the most amazing sports movie you'll ever see. And I actually covered this in a very short, like, great basketball movies segment I did. And basically, long story short, the movie is a lot more about the politics of basketball, especially college basketball, than it is about really basketball. You don't really see much game action in that. And for me, when I was a little kid, all I cared about was just seeing sports, and it didn't really matter at all what kind of movie it was. Holmes Osborne plays Eddie Darko. He's familiar, but I can't honestly say that I've seen him in anything that I actually remember him from. I didn't see his face and immediately remember a single movie he'd been in, but he also seemed familiar in some way. Maggie Gyllenhaal plays Elizabeth Darko, and of course, she's Jake Gyllenhaal's real life sister, and she plays his sister in this movie. She was in Stranger Than Fiction, which I abso-fucking-lutely love. Will Ferrell. It's just a really enjoyable movie, and it's just nice. I really fucking like it, and honestly, it made me develop such a crush on Maggie Gyllenhaal. The way they portray her in the movie, she's so crush worthy, honestly. She was also in The Dark Knight, notably that she was a recast when Katie Holmes couldn't play Rachel Dawes after Batman Begins, and basically just, I don't dislike Maggie Gyllenhaal. I didn't like this recasting. I didn't like the way Maggie Gyllenhaal played the part. It was just really off to me, and maybe it was just because I was thinking Katie Holmes and she did something different with it. She wasn't terrible. It was just probably, I would say she was probably the weakest part of that entire movie. She was also in a movie called Crazy Heart with Jeff Bridges, and I remember that as being like another one of those ones that kind of is in the same vein as like A Star Is Born with Bradley Cooper, where it's like it's not really a great movie, but everybody at the Academy Awards acts like it is. And it's really just an okay movie, but it's been done to death. The thing with like some guy who's like got a drinking problem and basically has to like come to terms with it and gets himself in trouble and stuff. It's just not my favorite kind of movie. I don't really enjoy those kinds. And if I actually see them, I am pretty bummed out that that's what they are. Patrick Swayze plays Jim Cunningham. I am listing a lot more of these people in this cast because this cast it's strange because it doesn't feel as deep as it really is. There's just a lot of random well-known people in it. So anyway, he plays this Jim Cunningham character. He was of course in Dirty Dancing, previously covered on this podcast. I really enjoy Dirty Dancing. I know it's a bit of a chick flick kind of movie, but I really like it. And he was also in Roadhouse, which is a ridiculous movie from the 80s where he plays a cooler, which is basically a bouncer that is better than a bouncer or something like the head bouncer. I don't know. I don't remember what the real distinction was between a bouncer and a cooler, but that's what he is in the movie. And Sam Elliott's also in that movie. It's really over the top and ridiculous, but it's pretty enjoyable. And last but not least, he was in Red Dawn, which is a movie I intend to cover on this podcast. Probably not right away because I try and space out movies with the same personnel in them so that it's not so similar episode to episode. But Red Dawn is about a Soviet invasion of the United States, like on US soil, and it is fucking great. I really love it. Drew Barrymore plays Karen Pomeroy. She was in The Wedding Singer, which is a great fucking rom-com with Adam Sandler. It's set in the 80s. It's a pretty fucking solid movie. It's really amusing, but it's got a lot more heart to it than most Adam Sandler movies. She was, of course, in E.T. as a very young child, and I remember E.T. vaguely. I've watched it in my adult life, but I just remember as a kid thinking that E.T. was a fucking terrifying movie. Like, there's all this shit where the government comes and they're like quarantining ET. I don't know. It's a little bit much for me, or at least it was for me as a young kid. I couldn't fucking take it. Oh, and she's also in Charlie's Angels, the original remake of the TV show. She was in that with Cameron Diaz and Lucy Liu. I do remember enjoying that movie. I never saw the sequel ever. I don't think if I went back and watched Charlie's Angels now as a non 13 or 14-year-old who was just giddy to see pretty women, I don't think that I would like it that much. I don't think it would be very good. I don't think the acting or the writing was particularly good, and it was just a little stupid, but that's just me. That was just my take on it. And Seth Rogen is also in this movie. I believe this was his first ever movie role, and he plays Ricky Danforth. And he was also, of course, in Knocked Up, which was kind of his breakout role, where he plays this guy who impregnates this girl that he has a one night stand with. And it's basically the story of how that plays out with them dealing with her pregnancy and all that stuff. He was in 40-Year-Old Virgin. I love him in 40-Year-Old Virgin. I really love this movie in general, actually. Really fucking solid. He is basically just one of the main character's many friends. You know, Steve Carell is the main character, Andy, and basically, once his coworker friends find out that he's a virgin, they continually dispense some of the most questionable advice you could possibly dispense to somebody, and it's just really fucking amusing. He was also in a movie called 50-50 with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. This is one I'm contemplating covering on this show. I love the movie. It's bordering on comedy, but it's much heavier than a regular comedy, and I really enjoy it. It's got a lot of great people in it. It's got a lot of deep fucking moments in it, and I just really love it. Okay, for casting notes, Vince Vaughn, Mark Wahlberg, and Jason Schwartzman were all considered for the role of Donnie. Vaughn turned it down as he thought he was a little too old for it, which is 100% a good call by him because he would have totally been too old because he had already been in the movie Swingers by the time this came out, probably even in a couple of other movies by the time this came out. So he would have been way too fucking old seeming to play a high schooler. Wahlberg insisted on playing the character if he got the part with a lisp, which is not a good option. Like, you don't want, generally, I would say, your main character to have a lisp or any kind of speech impediment like that, unless it's like pivotal to the story or is super necessary, I guess, in some way. I mean, like Sling Blade, I guess you could say he probably has a bit of a speech impediment. He's really just not all there, you know? And that's a little different. Schwartzman had to back out due to scheduling conflicts. Otherwise, he probably would have gotten this movie. And I don't know that it would have quite been what it became as a cult phenomenon if he would have been the star. All right, so for the plot synopsis, after narrowly escaping a bizarre accident, a troubled teenager is plagued by visions of a man in a large rabbit suit who manipulates him to commit a series of crimes. I got that from IMDb because I was really having a hard time trying to figure out my own way to distill this. And that is necessarily excluding a lot of plot elements in the plot synopsis because it would give too much away, I think, if you said too much more. But I don't think that it's really something that if I saw that plot synopsis, I would feel like after I saw this movie, like I really got a good sense of what the movie was going to be. Tagline for this movie, I struggled with this one. The one I landed on was "You can never go too far," which is not a great tagline, especially for this movie. All right, guys, let's just dive right into the plot of this motherfucking movie. So, this movie was another one of those ones that I had never really heard much about and just rolled the dice on watching it at the time. I think I saw it for the first time quite a few years after it first came out. I should probably mention that this movie is super dark throughout and not even so much in tone, but visually. It's just very dark looking in every way throughout most of it, especially in certain sequences. The opening shot closes in on our titular character Donnie laying in the middle of a road, seemingly up in the mountains. He looks like he's really confused and he's wearing what looks like you would have gone to bed in, like pajamas. Pajamas. I hear people say pajamas more often, and I cannot nail down what people call it pajamas and what people call it pajamas, but I've heard like a few random stragglers where people are actually calling it pajamas like I do. Don't really know what that's all about. It's kind of like aunt and aunt. I call my parents' siblings that are female aunt and what am I talking about? I say aunt and everyone else in the free world with the exception of a few people call them aunt and I don't know what that's all about. Donnie just kind of stands up and smiles and starts riding his bike home, and it shows him riding all the way through town. I should probably also mention that this movie is set in October of 1988, because even though it's not super heavy handed in the fact that it's set in a different time than present, it's important to note that, and I'll be giving pretty regular updates about what day it is as we progress. That night, after Donnie arrives home, his family is all sitting around the dinner table, and his sister Elizabeth announces to her father Eddie that she plans to vote for Dukakis in the upcoming presidential election. For those of you who don't know about the 1988 presidential election, it was between Republican candidate George H.W. Bush, who was the vice president under Ronald Reagan from, what is it, 80 to 88? and the Democratic candidate, Michael Dukakis, who had served as the governor of Massachusetts for a while. Bush won in a landslide victory, which was the third consecutive landslide win for Republicans in presidential races since 1980, when Reagan was elected. Mr. Darko does react pretty negatively to Elizabeth's assertion that she will vote for Dukakis, and he condescendingly explains to her that she may think differently about who she should support when half of her husband's paycheck goes to taxes. But Elizabeth kind of like scoffs at this and says that she doesn't intend to rely on a husband to support her. She says that at the very least, she doesn't intend to squeeze out any children until she's around 30. Then Donnie jokingly chimes in and asks her if she will still be working at the yarn barn when she has kids. Then her mother Rose chimes in and also criticizes Dukakis for not being a fitting leader whose policies will not be able to facilitate Elizabeth having children when she's older. Then the youngest daughter, Samantha, asks when she will be able to squeeze out a baby, and Donnie jokingly says not until 8th grade, but his family doesn't really find it very funny, but people are so fucking uptight, man. It's just a joke. He doesn't really think that his super young sister is going to have a baby that young. He's just kidding around, all right? Just calm the fuck down. Donnie makes a comment about his parents paying a therapist $200 an hour to hear Donnie's thoughts, and he says that maybe Elizabeth should get her own therapist if she wants someone to listen to her. Elizabeth calls Donnie a dick, and then she immediately reveals that he hasn't been taking his mental health medication. The two siblings argue with each other back and forth until their parents have had enough and tell them to stop. I really love that the two of them are actually siblings in real life. It really makes their dynamic feel way more genuine, especially when they're arguing with each other. And it just gets to be awkwardly silent as everyone just sits there looking at each other for a minute. After dinner, Donnie is reading a book in his room, and his mother comes in and he angrily tells her that he's reading and to get out of his room. She crosses her arms and asks him where he goes at night, and then he again tells her to get out of his room. She asks him if he toilet papered the Johnson's house, and he said that he stopped doing that in 6th grade, which is totally a believable excuse and shouldn't be read into any more than that. She tells him that she wants to know what happened to her son, and she claims that she doesn't even recognize him anymore. So he tells her that maybe she should start taking the pills that he has to take to resolve that issue. After she leaves and closes the door, while she's still in the hallway, he calls her a bitch, and then she can still hear him from behind the door. So she's like stopping in the middle of the hallway when he says it, and she's just like reacting to it. Then when she goes to tell her husband that her son called her a bitch, her husband simply says that she's not a bitch. And it's like, yeah, man, I'm sure that's exactly what she needed to hear. Probably didn't need any more elaboration or like a, hey, I'll go talk to him kind of thing. Seemingly the same night, the dad is up watching the presidential debate on TV and is obviously rooting for Bush as the two candidates go back and forth. We see the clock on the wall strike midnight and begin chiming as the screen goes black with white text that says October 2nd, 1988. To clarify, this happens a lot, the black screen with a white text establishing what day it is, because time and date is pretty critical to this story, you'll find out. A very gruff and distorted sounding voice says, "Wake up," and the light in Donnie's room is on, and Donnie slowly gets out of bed, seemingly in a trance, and makes his way to his bedroom door and down the stairs as the voice keeps talking to him. The voice says that it's been watching him as Donnie mindlessly walks out of his house, and the voice keeps summoning him to come closer to it. Donnie arrives at a golf course while it's still the middle of the night and looks over to one of the greens, and next to a flagpole, he sees what is pretty clearly a man in a rabbit costume. The rabbit is named Frank, and it appears that the rabbit is the source of the voice, and it says 28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes, 12 seconds. That is when the world will end. The screen gets darker as it cuts to Donnie over and over, giving a very evil grin as he keeps his head down slightly and sort of looks through the top of his eyes. Very unsettling. While Donnie is still at the golf course, it cuts back to his house where his dad has fallen asleep watching TV, and the TV is just staticky screen with no programming on, which actually used to be a thing where I don't even remember this in my lifetime, but it used to be that like more channels would not have programming at night and it would go to like a blank screen or like a one of those like multicolored placeholder screens while there was no programming. And it wasn't until I think the 90s that they started just having a bunch of filler programs on at night because I think it was like they wanted to at least have programming on because it didn't really cost them that much to broadcast reruns and infomercials and stuff and they could make more money. It appears that Donnie's mother is still laying in bed sleeping and Elizabeth walks in the door quietly from wherever she's been, seemingly like out with friends. Maybe she wasn't supposed to be out. I don't really know if they established that. Suddenly, we hear this loud crash, and the chandelier in their staircase area shakes violently, and the whole house starts to shake as well, as if an earthquake or something is happening, and everyone who is sleeping is jarred awake. Elizabeth slides down against the wall to a seated position on the floor in a panic, and we just hear her breathing really hard as the scene fades to black, and we don't really know what the fuck just happened. It cuts to what I suppose is the next morning, and the sun's out, and Donnie is laying asleep on the grass at the golf course, being woken up by two men who know him by way of his father, like they know who his father is, and they happen to know him, like they've met him before. The two men joke with each other as Donnie wakes up and comes to his feet. Donnie looks down at his arm and sees the timestamp 28:06:42:12 written in some kind of black ink, like marker maybe, or like some kind of weird charcoal maybe. I don't know. The two men make sure Donnie's okay as he looks down and he looks around confused at what's written on his arm, and they kindly tell him to not hang out on the golf course at night anymore, and Donnie just walks away back home. Donnie gets back to his house, and there is a police barricade in front, and a big crowd has gathered, and people are asking him what happened to his house. Donnie just casually walks through the barricade, and the police officer does a really mediocre job attempting to stop him. And Donnie just tells him that it's his house. Donnie looks over to see that a crane is lifting a severely damaged jet engine that seems to have crashed into his house, but not like the whole jet, just the engine. His family is outside and relieved to see him as he's walking up because it appears that the engine actually hit his room and they had feared for the worst about his fate. While all of the noise is going on from the machinery running, a man from the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, approaches Donnie's parents and asks to speak to them in private. The two of them reluctantly agree and leave the kids standing there while they go over and talk to the FAA guy. The two of them sign some papers, and the man explains that they will be put in a hotel until they can repair the house. Elizabeth smiles as she explains to Donnie that no one seems to know where the fuck the engine came from or how any of this happened. It cuts to Eddie and Rose laying on a bed in the hotel, and Eddie asks Rose if she remembers some guy named Frankie Fiedler from school and explains that he died on his way to prom, and the people said that he was doomed, and that they could probably say the same thing about Donnie, which is just kind of a weird thing to like say as an observation to your wife about your child, but it is what it is. The kids are in a separate hotel room, and Samantha is asking about what happened, and Elizabeth just tells her that they don't know. Like, they have no fucking idea where this jet engine came from, and they don't understand how no one could possibly know. On what I guess is the next morning, Rose drops the kids off at the bus stop, and their friends all want to know what happened, but none of them really want to talk about it. Plus, they don't really know shit anyway. I should clarify that this is just Donnie and Samantha because I think Elizabeth has a license, so she probably drove to school. I don't know why she couldn't just drive her brother and sister to school. It is what it is. Not really clear. Donnie smokes a cigarette with his friends and reminds Samantha that he'll put her doll in the garbage disposal if she rats him out for smoking. And there's also this weird moment that happens where one of Donnie's friends are making fun of this awkward Asian girl that is standing with Samantha. And Donnie basically just like shuts down the friend and just tells him to leave the girl alone. And it's kind of weird, but it just happens. They get to school and we see a teacher named Mrs. Farmer, who is played by Beth Grant, who is such a great character actress. She always plays such a stuck up bitch in everything. I fucking love her. One of the few things that feel particularly 80s about this movie are the songs. So, like the song Head Over Heels by Tears for Fears plays during this sequence while they're showing all of these people walking around at the school. The teachers are introducing themselves to each other, but it's one of those stylized sequences where you can't really hear any audio in the scene, and the only thing you can really hear is the song playing, and it's mildly slow motion. It's very weird. It cuts to a scene in one of Donnie's classes where Miss Pomeroy, played by Drew Barrymore, is teaching some kind of literature class. He calls on Donnie to ask him why the people in the story burnt the money they found, and he says that the book explains that the characters thought of destruction as a form of creation, and they just wanted to see what change would come about if they ironically burned the money. To clarify, they are talking about a book called The Destructors, I believe, by Graham Greene. It comes up a little bit later, so I just wanted to mention that. Suddenly, this new girl named Gretchen Ross arrives in class and explains that she was accidentally registered in the wrong English class originally, and they corrected it, and that's why she's late. Gretchen is played by Jenna Malone, and if you're not familiar with who she is, she kind of reminds me of Kristen Stewart, but perhaps a little bit more personable. I don't know. Gretchen asks Miss Pomeroy where she should sit, and Miss Pomeroy tells her that she should sit by the boy that she thinks is the cutest, and I think it's pretty safe to say that if you were a teacher who said that in any setting, at any grade level in this day and age, you'd go right to jail. Like, just immediately arrested, and you'd go straight to jail. Gretchen awkwardly stands there looking around at all the different boys in class, and some of them are making eyes at her like they want her to sit next to them. And then she casually walks up and sits next to Donnie, who made no such gestures toward her. He just kind of looked back at her. Donnie and his dad are riding home from school, and the dad is talking about how they were told that it was going to take about a week to fix the roof where the engine damaged the house. And he explains to Donnie that they still don't know what happened or where the engine came from, or rather, the FAA won't actually share the information with them, which seems pretty standard. Eddie explains to Donnie that he signed an NDA that doesn't allow him to talk to anybody about it, and Donnie finds it pretty amusing that he had to agree not to talk to anybody about something that no one seems to know anything about anyway. Suddenly, Donnie has to get his dad to pay attention to the road as there's some strange old woman standing in the middle of it that he almost hits. But luckily, he comes to a stop before actually striking her, and she seems completely clueless that anything is even going on. They get out and make sure she's okay, and she acts as if nothing happened and checks her mailbox, which is empty, and Donnie tells her no mail today, maybe tomorrow. And then she whispers something that we can't hear into Donnie's ear, and then heads inside her house. Eddie asks Donnie what she said to him, and Donnie never answers before it cuts to the scene with him and his therapist, Dr. Thurman. Donnie explains to Dr. Thurman that he made a new friend who is imaginary and is named Frank. He explains to her that Frank told Donnie to follow him into the future and said that the world is going to come to an end. She asks him if he thinks that the world is actually coming to an end, and he says no and that that's stupid. It cuts to class where Donnie and the other kids are watching a video that the teacher, Mrs. Farmer, is playing for them of a motivational speaker named Jim Cunningham. Cunningham is played by Patrick Swayze. The video for his service is pretty fucking stupid, but it's very well done in this movie in that it feels like a real video that someone would make if they were a motivational speaker that toured high schools. It's pretty clear that Mrs. Farmer thinks Jim Cunningham is just wonderful and gets very irritated with students who find the video stupid or don't want to really engage with it. The service is called Controlling Fear, and Mrs. Farmer literally just watches it in complete and utter joy as it continues. To be clear, Jim Cunningham has what I refer to as snake oil salesman vibes, meaning that he can probably make a decent amount of money off people who are too dumb to realize what a scam he's running. It cuts to that night when Donnie is sleeping on the couch and Frank's voice tells him to wake up. To be clear, Jake Gyllenhaal does an amazing job of switching into a more deranged look during these sequences where Frank is telling him these random things to do. It shows Frank in the rabbit suit, and suddenly Donnie is walking around wielding an axe that he is resting on his shoulder. Donnie walks up and swings his axe at what appears to be a big water pipe, but it suddenly cuts back to him sitting on the couch, and it's not clear if he maybe just hallucinated all of that or not. Or I should say, it's clear he's hallucinated this whole thing, but it's not clear how much of it actually might have happened in real life, and he was just seeing it as a hallucination. As he sits there on the couch, we hear water rushing, presumably from the pipe that he cut into with the axe. Cuts to a screen that says October 6th, 1988. 24 days remain. The next morning, Donnie and Samantha are again standing at the bus stop waiting, and two female students randomly run up to them. The two girls explain that their mom said that the school is closed that day due to some kind of flooding, and the kids rejoice that they don't have to attend school that day. And I mean, it'd be like, fuck yeah. There is nothing more amazing than finding out you don't have to go to school, especially on a day when you weren't even expecting it. Amazing. Just perfect. It cuts to Principal Cole talking to a maintenance man who is explaining to him that there is a busted water main and that 12 of the classrooms in the school are flooded. He also shows him that the dog statue outside has a giant axe buried in the head of it, and no one seems to know what to make of that. And it cuts to a different shot of these school officials looking at the axe in the statue, and we see on the ground in black spray paint the words, quote, "They made me do it," end quote. Donnie walks up to two school bullies who are creepily talking to Gretchen at a sidewalk corner, and Donnie tells the three of them that school was canceled, and Gretchen asks him if he'll walk her home. One of the two bullies is named Ricky and is played by Seth Rogen, by the way. The other bully is named Seth, and I don't recognize the actor, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to tell you what his name is later. Dan tells Gretchen that she should probably check her backpack because those two guys have a tendency to steal shit from people. Then he asks her why she moved there, and she explains that her parents got a divorce and her mom had to get a restraining order against her stepdad. She explains that her stepdad had emotional problems, and Donnie excitedly interjects and says that he also has emotional problems and asks her what kind of emotional problems her stepdad had. And she says that her stepdad stabbed her mom. And that tidbit really takes the wind out of Donnie's sails, but he probably should have gauged the mood a little better. I mean, she was talking about getting a restraining order against the guy, and Donnie didn't really pick up on the fact that maybe he doesn't want to try and relate to this guy. She goes on to explain that they had to change their names and that she thought Gretchen Ross was a pretty cool name. Donnie explains that he went to jail once after accidentally burning down an abandoned house. Like, he didn't intend to burn it down, but basically fucking around in the house caused it to be burned down in some way. He explains that it ended up causing him to get held back in school and he is now unable to get a license until he's 21. He explains that he has taken to new hobbies to get away from the more destructive ones in his past, like painting and writing and things like that. She tells him that Donnie Darko sounds like a superhero alter ego name, and then he kind of suggests that he might actually be a superhero. Gretchen awkwardly deflects this weird interaction by saying that she has to go write a paper on the greatest invention to benefit mankind. Donnie is familiar with the teacher that the assignment is for and says that she should choose antiseptics because before them, there was no real sanitation in the world, especially as it pertains to medicine. Donnie says that he's really happy that school got flooded that day because if it wouldn't have been flooded, they would have never gotten to have had that great conversation. And Gretchen just seems a little perplexed by the notion that Donnie thought that this conversation was so great. She tells him that he's weird, and as he apologizes for his behavior, she stops him and says that it was a compliment and that she likes that he's weird. Donnie very awkwardly asks her if she would like to go with him. Gretchen misunderstands this and asks him where he wants to go, and he explains that this is how they say it around there. Two people are going together like dating, and Gretchen agrees to go with him. Gretchen turns to walk away, and Donnie asks her where she's going, and she just says that she's going home. And Donnie feels like an idiot, but that's life sometimes, you know? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have talked to a woman and felt like a moron afterwards. Them's the breaks, kids. Donnie has another therapy session with Dr. Thurman where she hypnotizes him. Dr. Thurman explains that when she claps her hands twice, that's when Donnie should snap out of his hypnosis. She asks him about his week, and he explains how he met Gretchen and how the two of them are now going together. She asks him if he still thinks about girls a lot, and he says yes. And then she asks him how school is going, and it's like he doesn't register that question at all and continues saying that he thinks about girls a lot. Dr. Thurman explains that she asked him a question about school, and he says that he thinks about girls at school a lot, and he thinks about fucking. Donnie veers off into a weird tangent about thinking about married with children and wanting to fuck Christina Applegate. Dr. Thurman attempts to course correct as Donnie goes off on a tangent, and she asks him about Frank, and suddenly she realizes that Donnie has unzipped his pants and is reaching into his pants, and she has to suddenly clap twice to snap him out of the hypnosis, and he wakes up shocked by the state he's in, and he awkwardly zips and buttons his pants back up, and it cuts to him in class with Miss Pomeroy again. The police are there having kids write the phrase, "they made me do it" on the chalkboard one by one, trying to basically identify who wrote that on the ground or the sidewalk around the statue. It cuts to the bathroom where Donnie is going to wash his hands and is confronted by one of the bullies, Seth Devlin. Seth asks Donnie if he had been telling people that Seth was the one who flooded the school, and Donnie says he didn't say shit. And Seth says that that's not what he heard, and Donnie says that if he's innocent, he has nothing to worry about, which is not a great thing to say in this moment for Donnie, but he says it anyway. Suddenly, Seth grabs Donnie by his hair and pulls him back and whips out his switchblade and holds it near Donnie's neck threateningly. Out of nowhere, Seth just suddenly lets Donnie go and leaves the bathroom as Donnie collects himself. It cuts to Donnie hanging out with his friends somewhere, but it's not very clear where. But they're shooting bottles from a distance with what I guess is a BB gun, and we get a hilarious bit of back and forth where Donnie's friends are talking about wanting to find a quintessential Smurfette for their gang. The friends get a little carried away talking about all of the Smurfs having their way with Smurfette, and they claim that that's why Papa Smurf made Smurfette, was so that they could all do that with her. And Donnie shuts them down by explaining that Papa Smurf didn't make Smurfette and that Gargamel did. He explains that Gargamel created Smurfette and sent her to the Smurf village as an evil spy to destroy it, but the Smurf way of life transformed her because they were so wholesome and good. And then he caps it off by explaining that the whole gangbang scenario could never happen because Smurfs are asexual and don't have reproductive organs inside their little pants. The friends are speechless after Donnie's rebuttal, and they look over to see that Mrs. Farmer is honking and has to stop to get out of her car on the road because she almost ran into the same old woman that Donnie and his dad almost ran into before. Mrs. Farmer threatens to call social services on the old woman, and for clarity's sake, the kids refer to the old woman as Grandma Death. Donnie says that Grandma Death is age 101 and that all she seems to do every day is go out and check her mailbox. It cuts to an emergency PTA meeting at 7 o'clock that night where the teachers and parents are gathered, and the principal explains that the police have been conducting a full investigation of the cause of the school flooding. He goes on to explain that several of the suspects in the vandalism are their own students, and suddenly Mrs. Farmer interrupts holding the book The Destructors by Graham Greene from Miss Pomeroy's class, asking why it's being allowed to be taught in their school. The principal attempts to get Mrs. Farmer to calm down and wait her turn to speak, but she continues on. She explains that because she has a child that attends the school, and she is also a teacher there, that she bridges the divide between the parents and the teachers at PTA meetings. And I want to explain, if I haven't been clear enough, Mrs. Farmer is the quintessential Karen, up in arms about the dumbest stuff in the world, is generally unpleasant to deal with, and thinks she knows better than everybody else. It cuts back and forth between the PTA meeting and Donnie in a dimly lit bathroom, looking in a mirror and talking to Frank. And Frank is assuring Donnie that he got away with the damage that he caused at the school that resulted in the flooding. Donnie sees Frank in the mirror, and when Donnie touches the glass, it's as if it's simply a force field between the two of them, and it kind of ripples where he touches it. It's like it's not really a mirror. When it cuts back to the PTA meeting, Mrs. Farmer is complaining about the book, and she's still going on about it and says that it has eerily similar elements that parallel the events with vandalizing the school and causing the flood. Rose Darko asks Mrs. Farmer what she's talking about because the PTA does not ban books as a rule, but Mrs. Farmer asserts that the book in question is pornography, and Miss Pomeroy chimes in to say that the book and its subject matter is meant to be ironic. But Mrs. Farmer tells her to go back to grad school. I gotta say, calling a book like this pornography is just the kind of hyperbolized rhetoric people love to use to manipulate the masses. Calling it pornography when it clearly is not is just ridiculous. And there's a joke in this moment that I really didn't understand the first time around because Mrs. Darko asks Mrs. Farmer if she even knows who Graham Greene is, and Mrs. Farmer says that she's seen Bonanza or that they've all seen Bonanza before. Joke here is that Graham Greene is both the name of the author of the Destructors that they're discussing and the name of an actor who is usually the guy who plays like every American Indian character in every movie from the early 80s until 2025 when he passed away. It's just he is very commonly in that role. And he was actually in Dances with Wolves with Mary McDonnell, who plays Rose Darko. But apparently, Mrs. Farmer is so clueless that she doesn't even realize that neither of those people had anything to do with the popular Western TV show Bonanza that ran for 14 seasons from 1959 until 1973 and had 431 episodes. Donnie continues talking with Frank in the mirror, asking him why he had Donnie flood the school. Donnie also asks him where he came from, and Frank asks him if he believes in time travel. Suddenly, Donnie's sister Samantha opens the bathroom door and interrupts him and asks him who he's talking to. And he just tells her that he's just taking his pills. And although she accepts this as a dismissal, she doesn't really seem to believe him. Cuts to Donnie in Mrs. Farmer's class, and she is again showing Jim Cunningham's fucking awful video. She draws a spectrum on the chalkboard that shows fear at the negative end and love at the positive end. The assertion of Cunningham's techniques is that everything seems to fall into those two categories, and it's just kind of weird. It's like they're saying it's in those two categories in some capacity, and that's why there's a spectrum. But they call this spectrum the lifeline. And my god, Beth Grant is just fucking amazing at playing this character as such a hateable bitch. Like, she's so angry about the book at the PTA meeting and thinks it's terrible, and then she is simply beaming at the concept of discussing this stupid fucking motivational speaker's teachings. He hands out scenarios on slips of paper to each of the students and wants them to interpret the scenario and place an X on the lifeline as to how the scenario is either related to fear or to love. When it's Donnie's turn, he goes up front and reads his scenario, and it's about someone who finds a wallet and returns it to the people at the address inside it, but they take the money out of it before they take the wallet back. Donnie pauses for a moment and explains to Mrs. Farmer that he really doesn't understand what this is all about, and she simply tells him that he needs to place an X on the lifeline where it pertains to fear or love. Donnie explains that it doesn't make sense to act like every scenario in the world can fall into one of the two categories because not everything is that simple. But she reiterates that fear and love are the deepest human emotions, and Donnie frustratedly tells her that she is ignoring all other emotions that could apply to the scenario. She tells him that if he doesn't complete the assignment, he will get a 0 for the day. And we don't really see how he responds to her saying that. But it cuts to him with his parents in the office of the principal, and the principal is asking him what he said to Mrs. Farmer in class. And it's revealed that Mrs. Farmer is standing right next to the principal, and she declares that Donnie told her to shove the lifeline up her ass, but she, of course, phrases it like a fucking prude. Mr. Darko fights back a chuckle when he hears what Donnie said to her. The Darkos leave the office, and Rose sees Mrs. Farmer and stops her to seemingly apologize for Donnie's behavior. But Mrs. Farmer cuts her off and explains that she fears what will happen if people don't start taking the righteous path in life instead of succumbing to fear. Rose just stands there looking at her in confusion and doesn't say a word back to her before it cuts to Donnie's room. Elizabeth is in there with Donnie and she's talking to a friend on the phone about what Donnie did in class and how their parents bought Donnie a whole bunch of new stuff for his room. And she says that she wishes a jet engine would fall on her room. And it's kind of like she's acting like they just bought him a bunch of stuff for the fuck of it, even though it seems like they actually bought him stuff to replace what was damaged when the engine destroyed his room. And it all seems pretty reasonable to me. It turns to October 10th, 1988, and there are 20 days remaining until the supposed end of the world. That day, Donnie stops his teacher, Mr. Monitoff, who is played by Noah Wiley, and he asks him if he knows anything about time travel. Monitoff shares the basic concept of a wormhole, which is something that allows travel between two distant locations, but it's only theoretical. Mr. Monitoff secretly gives Donnie a book and tells him not to tell anybody, but he says that the book was written by someone who used to teach at the school. He says the teacher who wrote the book used to be a nun, and she just seemingly changed overnight and left the church and started teaching science. The book is called The Philosophy of Time Travel, and the teacher's name is Roberta Sparrow. Donnie's in stunned disbelief at the name of this teacher slash author, but we in the audience don't really know why quite yet, and we're going to have to sit tight for all of 10 seconds to find out. Donnie goes out in the hall and looks at an old photo of the faculty, and it zooms in on the woman's face, who is supposed to be this Roberta Sparrow, and it's revealed that she's actually Grandma Death. Donnie talks about the book with his family, and his parents seem shocked as well, and they talk a little bit more about who this woman is. Rose claims that even though she lives in a piece of crap house, she's supposedly like loaded and very rich. Eddie explains that she used to have a gem collection and people would frequently try and rob her to get it from her. And he says that he didn't even realize that she was still alive until he almost hit her with his car. Donnie is in a session with Dr. Thurman telling her the story. He explains to her that Frank was talking about time travel and that it can't be a coincidence that Grandma Death wrote a book about time travel as well. Dr. Thurman asks Donnie what Grandma Death whispered in his ear, and he says she told him that all living things die alone. He says that it reminds him of his dog Callie, who died when he was 8 years old and crawled under their porch before dying and just wanted to be alone, seemingly, before knowing the dog was going to die. Dr. Thurman asks Donnie if he feels alone right now, and Donnie says he doesn't know and that he'd like to believe he's not, but he's never seen any proof and he doesn't like to debate about it. Donnie basically just says that the whole idea is absurd, and she questions him about whether or not he actually thinks the idea of finding God is absurd, and he just says that it's absurd if everyone dies alone. Dr. Thurman asks Donnie if that scares him, and Donnie just says he doesn't want to be alone. It cuts to Rose talking to who I guess is another mother, and she's carrying on about how great the motivational speaker Jim Cunningham is, and how he made her realize that she lived her entire life in fear before she learned his teachings. And then the mother says that she can't believe Jim is single, and it's just super fucking weird how much she's fawning over this guy. But it cuts to Donnie watching a football game on TV with his dad and a couple of other people. Like, I think it's one of his friends that we've seen before, and maybe his friend's dad. All of a sudden, Donnie is looking at his father and he sees some sort of weird, transparent thing sticking out of his chest before he gets up to go to the kitchen. It seems as though the transparent thing is almost leading his father to where he's going. The father isn't consciously aware that it's there. I had to Google what these things are actually called, and the results said that they are fourth dimensional constructs, and I guess they kind of look like tubes, but they're more like giant worms made of water or something, but I'll call the fourth dimensional constructs spheres to make it easier on me because that's what Donnie calls them later in the story. It seems that Donnie is the only one that can see the spears, and they're jutting out of everyone's chest, including his own, and they seem to be showing where a person is about to go, almost like the route on a GPS map. Donnie follows his spear upstairs to his parents' room into their closet where he discovers a pistol in a box and he pulls it out and looks at it. The next day, Donnie is waiting at the bus stop with the other kids he normally waits with. It's October 18th and 12 days remain until the end of the world. Donnie is walking with Gretchen through the woods and Donnie interrupts their conversation to point out that they've been going together for 2 weeks and he hesitates a little bit and Gretchen asks him if he wants to kiss her, so he slowly leans in to kiss her, but she backs away, and he tries to apologize, but she stops him and just says that she wants to kiss him when the time is right, and it reminds her of all the beautiful things in the world. And I gotta say, it seems pretty cut and dry that Gretchen was actually offering Donnie a kiss in this moment. She was like opening up to that, it was like she was allowing him to believe she wanted that even though she was very nice about shooting him down and explaining why she didn't want to kiss him yet, I would just be so frustrated that she said that the way she said it and let him believe that she was ready for him to kiss her. And then I would have had to deal with the awkwardness of her pulling away last second when she noticed I was going in for a kiss. That would have been fucking devastating for my confidence. As she finishes explaining herself, she points out that it's also awkward because there's some fat guy in a tracksuit just watching them from about 15 feet away while he's smoking a cigarette. Donnie's parents go to see Dr. Thurman to find out what she thinks is going on with Donnie. Dr. Thurman distills it into the notion that Donnie's detachment from the world seems to stem from his inability to cope with the things in the world that he finds threatening. And as she's saying this, it's cutting between Dr. Thurman's office and Donnie grabbing a knife from the knife block in his kitchen and looking in the mirror. Dr. Thurman asks them if Donnie has ever talked about his friend Frank, the giant bunny rabbit, and the Darkos look at her confused because he's clearly never said anything about Frank to them before. And to be fair, it seems like something you would kind of remember your kid talking about. It cuts to Donnie taking the knife from the kitchen and attempting to stab through the mirror where he sees Frank, but it keeps bouncing off the mirror. And then it cuts back to Dr. Thurman explaining that Donnie is experiencing what is called a daylight hallucination. She says what she wants to do to help Donnie is more hypnotherapy and to increase the dosage of his medication. Rose is very emotional as she is obviously struggling with Dr. Thurman's opinion, and she says that they'll have to give it a try if that's what Dr. Thurman thinks that he needs, even though it doesn't seem like she really wants to believe that that's what he needs. Mrs. Farmer arranges for an assembly with guest speaker Jim Cunningham. He comes on stage and is one of those annoying people that when talking to a crowd and introducing themselves, he keeps doing the whole thing where he's like saying good morning and he doesn't get a very enthusiastic response. And he's like, "Is that the best you can do?" And wants people to respond with even more enthusiasm and energy. And it's like, fuck off, dude. Donnie and Gretchen sit next to each other in the crowd, and Gretchen humors Cunningham while Donnie just watches him in irritation. A number of kids stand up to ask him questions like what they can do to get their sister to stop eating so much and how to decide what they want to do when they grow up. And one kid even asks how to learn how to fight. And basically, Cunningham reduces all of these questions down to fear or love, of course. Donnie gets up in front of the microphone and asks Cunningham how much they're paying him to be there. And this elicits a reaction from the school officials as Cunningham stammers and clearly doesn't want to answer the question. Donnie addresses the three students who ask questions that are now standing at the front and gives them very direct and practical yet somehow controversial advice about what to do in each of their situations. He says the sister who is eating too much should go get off the couch and try out for field hockey or something. He tells the kid who doesn't know what he wants to do when he grows up that that's a struggle everyone has. And he tells the kid who wants to learn how to fight that maybe he should lift some weights or take karate lessons so that the next time the bullies shove his head into the toilet that he can kick them in the balls. Cunningham cuts Donnie off and goes on and on about how Donnie is so full of fear and it's really heartbreaking for him to see. And Donnie tells him that although that all may be, he still thinks Cunningham is the fucking Antichrist, and all the students in the crowd cheer Donnie on as the principal comes over and removes Donnie from behind the microphone and takes him out of the assembly. Donnie is ranting about how terrible he thinks Cunningham is to Gretchen later, and she asks him if he's okay and tells him to calm down. Donnie asks her if she knows who Grandma Death is, and Donnie shows Gretchen the time travel book and explains to her that he has been seeing a lot of things that are talked about in the book, and he says that it can't just be a coincidence. Donnie goes back to see Monotov to ask more about some of the elements of the book, and he talks about the spears and asks if wormholes can appear anywhere, anytime. And Monotov says that it's pretty unlikely that they would just appear randomly. He says that it would take an act of God, and Donnie asks if this means that everything would be predetermined, but Monotov doesn't follow Donnie and what Donnie's saying because Donnie's having a lot of trouble articulating this to him. Monotov explains to Donnie essentially that if people could see their fates manifested visually, that it would give them the option to deliberately defy their fate and all predetermination would cease to exist. And then Donnie says that that's not true if everything is happening in God's channel. And Monotov says that he has to end the conversation because continuing on with this kind of discussion would cause him to potentially lose his job. Donnie is out walking and finds Jim Cunningham's wallet on the sidewalk and is astonished by the discovery. Frank's voice whispers to him that now he knows where Cunningham lives. Donnie tries to explain the spears to Dr. Thurman during a session by showing her Grandma Death's book. He talks about following his spear to his parents' bedroom closet, and she asks him what he found in there, and he hesitates for a very questionable amount of time and just says nothing. It cuts to Monotov's class where Gretchen and Donnie are presenting a project on an invention that they came up with. The invention is called IMG, which stands for Infant Memory Generator, where they would put these glasses on an infant's eyes, these like special glasses, while they're sleeping to help them start to develop memories earlier on in their life. Monotov stops their presentation to ask them if they considered the possibility that infants might need darkness during these early development stages and if this might be harmful to them. And it seems pretty clear that neither Gretchen nor Donnie thought of this. The bully, Seth, raises his hand to ask a question, and Monotov calls on him. Seth asks the two of them what would happen if parents put disturbing or satanic images in the IMG, and Gretchen asks if that's what he would put in there for his baby. And Seth Rogen's character, Ricky, chimes in to ask if Gretchen's dad really stabbed her mom. Monotov tells the bullies to get out, and Donnie chases after Gretchen as she storms out of the school, and he calls out to her and apologizes for what the bullies said in class, and she turns around and gives him a big honkin' kiss. The two of them go to see The Evil Dead at the theater, and Gretchen falls asleep next to Donnie while they're watching the movie, and Donnie looks over next to Gretchen and sees Frank sitting there, and he asks him why he wears that stupid bunny suit. Then Frank, in turn, asks him why he wears that stupid man suit. Donnie tells Frank to take off his mask, and he sees the face of what appears to be a kid close to his age who has suffered a severe injury to his eye. Donnie asks him what happened to his eye, and Frank just turns to Donnie and says, "I'm so sorry." Then Donnie asks him why they call him Frank, and he says that's the name of his father and his father before him. And if you watch this movie, especially for the first time, and by this point you felt like you had any fucking idea what was going on, you are far smarter than I will ever be. Donnie asks Frank when this is all going to stop, and Frank says that Donnie should already know when it's going to stop, alluding to the countdown that started toward the beginning of this movie when he first saw Frank. Frank tells Donnie to watch the movie screen because there's something he wants to show him, and Frank asks Donnie if he's ever seen a portal as one is seemingly opening up on the screen, and Frank just says, "Burn it to the ground," as the screen shows a picture of what I guess is supposed to be Jim Cunningham's house. Then Frank suddenly disappears, and Donnie puts up his hood and seemingly leaves Gretchen there at the theater, and he just heads for Cunningham's house, like walks out of the theater. There's a talent show going on at the school that night for some reason, and Jim Cunningham is hosting it. Mrs. Farmer is coaching the five girls, including Samantha Darko, for their talent show segment, and tells them that if they feel like vomiting at any point that they should just swallow it. Great advice. Elizabeth and her parents watch the show in amusement from their seats in the crowd as Donnie is seen walking into Cunningham's house. Donnie splashes gasoline everywhere before he sets the home ablaze. Then he returns to the theater where Gretchen is still sleeping and is none the wiser that he was ever gone. It cuts to the next day where Elizabeth is sitting in the living room watching the news, and they're talking about the fire at Cunningham's house and how they uncovered a ton of child pornography there. And Cunningham is seen being put in the back of a police cruiser. It's October 24th, and 6 days remain. Then the principal is talking with Miss Pomeroy in his office, and she asks him exactly what it is about her methods that he has a problem with, and he says he doesn't want to get into a debate with her. She expresses her concern over the growing apathy among the students as they're forced to deal with the prescribed curriculum, but he basically just tells her that she's fired and she can finish out the week and that he's sorry that she failed, even though that's not really what happened, and he's basically just a big fucking piece of shit. She promptly goes outside and yells the fuck word really loud into the great wide open and realizes that one of the students, the Asian girl from the bus stop, is sitting there and heard her say it, but neither of them really acknowledge it. We see Mrs. Farmer rejoicing over the news of Miss Pomeroy's firing with the principal, and suddenly someone comes up to her and shows her the newspaper with the article about Cunningham getting charged for the child pornography ring, and of course, the revelation destroys her. Mrs. Farmer comes to the Darko house, and Rose answers the door, and Mrs. Farmer explains that she is spearheading the defense of Jim Cunningham and that it's obviously some kind of conspiracy against him. The purpose of Mrs. Farmer's visit is to ask Rose to cover for her on the trip with the dance troupe of girls to LA because she can no longer go and she's needing to stay there for Cunningham's arraignment. Rose reluctantly agrees to chaperone the girls on the trip, and she goes up to Donnie's room and sees the drawing Donnie has of Frank on his calendar. Donnie walks in as Rose shows concern on her face, and she sits down with Donnie to explain to him that Elizabeth will be in charge while she's gone, and Eddie is out of town on business, and that he should call Dr. Thurman if he has any problems. He asks her how it feels to have a wacko for a son, and she says it feels wonderful. After Rose leaves, Donnie is looking at an envelope addressed to Roberta Sparrow. It's October 26th, and 4 days remain until the end of the world. Donnie is sitting in Miss Pomeroy's classroom with her alone, and he asks her what to say when the other kids ask about her, and she just says to tell everybody that everything will be fine. And she has the term cellar door written on the chalkboard, and she explains that the term was dubbed the most beautiful term of all time by some literature person or author or whoever. As Donnie walks out of the classroom, he sees the Asian girl that has been appearing in these random scenes throughout the movie that he defended from his friends early on at the bus stop, and he walks up to her and puts his hands on the side of her head on each of her earmuffs and says that he promises one day everything is going to be better for her. She tells him to shut up as she runs away in terror and drops her books, and she has his name written in red letters with hearts on one of the books, and it seems pretty clear that she probably had a crush on him, and he's just left there awkwardly holding her earmuffs. During a hypnotherapy session with Dr. Thurman, Donnie confesses that he was responsible for the flooding of the school and for the burning down of Cunningham's house. He says that he has to obey Frank because Frank saved his life, but he only has a few days left until they catch him. He says he has to obey Frank or he'll be left alone and he won't be able to figure out Frank's master plan. Dr. Thurman asks him, as she reels from the shock of his confession, if he now believes in God, and he ignores her question and says he has the ability to build a time machine now. And she asks when all of this is going to happen, and he just says soon. He can see Frank in the room, and he says that it's not going to be long until the sky will open up. And Dr. Thurman says that if the sky opens up, all he'll be left with is his memories and his choices. She says if this world were to end, there would only be Donnie and him and no one else. And Donnie is getting super emotional as she tries to comfort him on the floor. And it's now October 29th, and only one day remains until the end. Donnie comes downstairs, and Elizabeth excitedly tells him that she got into Harvard. And Donnie says that they should throw a party because their parents are out of town and they could totally get away with it. Elizabeth agrees and says that it would have to be a small party only, which is always a great plan. You know, no parties in movies ever get out of control. Let me just be clear about that. It cuts to the party that night, and Donnie's friends show up excited to drink and vandalize things. And Dr. Thurman calls their house and no one answers. So she leaves a message telling Rose to call her as soon as possible because obviously she's pretty concerned about what's going on with Donnie. Gretchen comes to the door and Donnie answers and she seems very distraught and he asks her if she's okay and she just says her mom's gone. They go upstairs to a bedroom for privacy and Gretchen explains that she got home and her mom didn't leave a note and left the house a mess. She says that she called the cops and they said that she should leave the house and go to a safe place, and Gretchen suspects that it was her stepdad who was behind everything. I do find it a little bizarre because my assumption is that Gretchen is not 18 or probably even particularly close to being 18. And I can't believe the police would just tell her to go find someplace safe to stay instead of taking that into their own hands and coming to get her and make sure that she is safe. While Donnie and Gretchen are making out in the bedroom, downstairs, Elizabeth asks if anyone knows where some kid named Frank went, and someone tells her that he went on a beer run. Rose calls and leaves a message on the machine saying that the trip went well and that she is taking a red-eye flight back that night and is expected to be home by 8:30 the next morning. It's now October 30th and 6 hours remain until the end of the world. Donnie and Gretchen are basically making out every chance they get in front of fucking everybody. Donnie sees the spear coming out of his chest again, and he sees a note on the fridge that says Frank went to get beer. Donnie starts freaking the fuck out and tells Gretchen that they have to go and that it has to do with Grandma Death and Frank, so they leave with his two friends as well. The four of them go out riding their bikes toward Grandma Death's house, and as they approach her house, Donnie thinks about the cellar door term from Miss Pomeroy and thinks it might be a way to get into Grandma Death's house. So they go down into her cellar and look around, and suddenly the two bullies just appear and grab Gretchen and Donnie around the neck and threaten them with knives and pull them outside. And they throw Gretchen on the road, and she's writhing around in terror as Seth is pinning Donnie down and continuing to threaten him with a knife. The other bully, Ricky, points out that a car is coming, but Seth doesn't run away and continues struggling with Donnie. And he looks up and sees the car and asks Donnie if he called the cops. And Donnie just says, Deus Ex Machina, before it's revealed that it's just a regular car, but the car comes through and runs over Gretchen, who is still laying in the road. Donnie walks over to Gretchen and continues repeating her name as the car passenger in a clown costume gets out of the vehicle that has come to a stop, and Donnie is repeatedly telling Gretchen to wake up. She's clearly dead, and the clown says to the driver, Frank, what did you do? And it pans up to show that Frank is wearing a rabbit costume. Frank asks if she's dead, and then he switches gears and starts ridiculing them for being out in the middle of the road. But Donnie just looks at him for a second and pulls out the gun that he found in his parents' closet and shoots Frank in the eye and kills him. Frank lays dead on the ground with his rabbit mask next to him, and Donnie yells out to the clown and tells him to go home and tell his parents that everything's going to be okay. Donnie goes home and kisses Elizabeth on the forehead, and when he goes back outside, he looks up to the sky and sees a creepy black cloud forming before he gets into his car. And as he starts the car, it's revealed that he has Gretchen's body in the seat next to him, and he looks over to her, and Donnie drives out into the mountains, and we hear voiceover of Frank saying 28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes, 12 seconds. Donnie stops on the side of the road and sits on top of the car and watches as the cloud formation dips down toward the city. It cuts to Rose on the airplane with Samantha, and it replays the audio of Donnie talking to Monotov about time travel. And suddenly, something happens on the plane as if they're crashing or something. It's like a bunch of turbulence, like really severe turbulence. And it shows Donnie getting back in his car and looking at Gretchen's lifeless body in the passenger seat. And it's revealed that the engine was actually falling off the plane that was creating the turbulence. And that was what his mother and sister were on, was that plane coming back from LA. And they went through a wormhole, and basically just the engine went through the wormhole and it landed on their house in a different timeline. And we see pivotal scenes of the movie in reverse, and it reveals that Donnie left the letter in Grandma Death's mailbox, talking to her about her book and all of the amazing things that have been happening to him. It suddenly cuts back to the night that Donnie's bedroom was hit by the jet engine, but this time, instead of wandering off to the golf course, he chooses to stay in bed and sacrifice himself as the engine destroys his room so that Gretchen and Frank wouldn't die, but he would. It shows that it's October 2nd, 1988, again, like it was at the very beginning of the movie. Dr. Thurman awakens in bed, confused about what has happened, and the cover version of Mad World by Gary Jules plays. It shows Miss Pomeroy and Mr. Monotov peacefully sleeping, and it shows the rest of the characters that have appeared throughout the movie. Then it cuts back to the Darko house, and the FAA agents are outside, just like they were at the beginning, and the Darkos are looking at the wreckage of the house, crying over the loss of Donnie, and a truck hauls a flatbed trailer away from the house that has the jet engine loaded on top of it, and Gretchen rides up to the house on her bike and asks what happened to a boy that's standing outside. It's one of the Darkos' neighbors, and he says that his neighbor was the victim of a horrible accident where he was smushed by a jet engine. The boy asks Gretchen if she knew him, and she just says no as she looks over at Rose. Gretchen and the boy wave at Rose as she waves back, and we roll credits. All right, so trivia for this movie. At the wrap party for the film, Seth Rogen and Jake Gyllenhaal agreed that they had absolutely no idea what the movie was about. The Aero Theater in Santa Monica, California, where the film's theater scenes were shot, has an annual tradition of playing Donnie Darko on Easter. Jake Gyllenhaal uses the strategy of rarely blinking to enhance his psychotic creepiness in this movie, as he is driven by Frank. This movie was filmed over a period of 28 days, which matches the length of time depicted in the film. In the movie theater scene, Richard Kelly originally intended to have Donnie and Gretchen going to see Chud, Chud, from 1984. I've heard of this, but I don't know what the hell that is. However, there were problems with finding out who actually owned the rights to the movie. Finally, Sam Raimi came to the rescue by allowing Kelly to use and distort footage from The Evil Dead from 1981 free of charge. This scene was filmed at the Aero Theater at 1328 Montana Avenue in Santa Monica, California. The Aero closed in 2003 but reopened in 2005. And that's just a nice little tidbit that has nothing to do with Donnie Darko. Writer and director Richard Kelly came up with the idea for the future blob spears while watching football. John Madden used a telestrator where he diagrammed a paused video to show where the players were about to go moments before letting the tape roll. Kelly watched this while high and started to think about what would happen hypothetically if someone upstairs was doing that to humans, like God or some kind of deity, I guess. Fittingly enough, Donnie first notices the future blobs while watching a football game. The director's cut greatly alters the pacing of the film, adding deleted scenes, new visual effects, and switching the soundtrack of the movie around. Richard Kelly regards this version not as a director's cut. This title was a publisher's idea. He considers the theatrical version just fine in its own right. Instead, to him, the new version is a special edition of sorts. On the set of Charlie's Angels from 2000, Drew Barrymore and Richard Kelly agreed that her production company, Flower Films, would produce this film for $4.5 million and that Barrymore would play Miss Pomeroy. Kelly says that if Barrymore hadn't stepped in, the movie would have either gone straight to video or cable television via Stars. At one point, when it looked like the film was going to be released directly to home markets, Christopher Nolan was also one of the influential factors in securing it as cinema release. I don't know about that tidbit, honestly. Like, I think Memento would have been out by now, and maybe it's true. Maybe he did have a hand in it. It just seems like a really weird little piece of information. Patrick Swayze wore his own clothes from the 1980s for the film. At the start of the movie, when Donnie rides his bicycle back into town, right after he passes the two ladies out power walking, Frank drives by in his red Trans Am. The original advertising material featured a crashing plane opening close to September 11, 2001. Naturally, this was all pulled, resulting in the film tanking at the box office due to a lack of advertising. It gained its audience when it was released on DVD, becoming a runaway hit and attracting cult attention. During conversations about sex with his therapist, the script had Donnie's fantasies be about Alyssa Milano. This had to be changed to Christina Applegate due to legal reasons. Initially, Richard Kelly sought permission from the estate of Peyo, the Smurfs, to show a Smurf doll for Donnie and his friends to shoot at. While on the same conference call, Kelly was told that Donnie would also be allowed to talk about Smurf sex because what had been written in the script was considered an accurate description of Smurf lore, I guess. All right, on to info and ratings. Opening weekend, $110,000, which is painfully low. Worldwide gross, 7.4. IMDb rating, 8.0. Letterboxd rating, 4.0. Rotten Tomato critics score, 88%. Rotten Tomato audience score, 80%. Personal rating, 5 out of 5 stars. Praise for this movie. It really makes you submerge yourself in it. This whole film is just great at drawing you in and making you wonder what in the fuck is going on. It does a great job depicting the strange hallucinatory sequences and making them dark and creepy. Jake Gyllenhaal is honestly a phenomenal actor and really plays mentally disturbed quite well, especially given how young he really was when he was in this role. Criticism: I had to Google a lot of stuff in this movie to really understand what was going on, but that's kind of more on me being a dumbass than this movie being bad, so I'm not really going to hold that against it. All right, everyone, thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Bye now.
What you hoped you would see. He's half blind, with hats tight, with all the dates release. For Footloose, The Dark Knight, a Kurt Russell brain freeze, Rear Windows and Gaslights. I'm Billy and you're Meg. Sharon Stone, the legs spread. The park starts with the eggs. It won't stop till you're dead. I'm here to welcome you to Brandon around your reviews. No method when I choose. It's Brandon around your reviews. You're looking for a man with no plans or programs. If you're looking for a man with no plans or programs, and he always leaves a chance to hold hands for romance, or you're looking for the loop with an old man or cold hands, it's a creature of the night who heads for his spotlight. I'm here for my sleep, oh, for his diet. I'm here to welcome you to Brandon and Ronald Reviews. No method when I choose. It's Brandon